Bob's amenities are suspended, but he shows up at the pool anyway. He plops down in a chair and he says, I'm staying. What should the manager or the board do? Should they call the police? Should they close the pool for everyone and say it's Bob's fault? Should they have their own security physically remove Bob? Should they threaten Bob with physical removal, just threaten him, see what happens? Or should they do none of the above? 72% said none of the above, and 24% said to call the police. Valerie, wow, 72% overwhelming said none of the options I gave. Commentary, please.
Well, I'm shocked at that answer because I think doing nothing, which I think presumably is what the response is the probably worst thing you could do. But I think that every single one of those options has pros and cons. And I think calling the police is something that is automatic because it's free. And I've had mixed experiences with the police because technically it could be considered a criminal trespass. But a lot of times law enforcement is very hesitant to get involved where there may be civil issues like an easement to use and enjoy or a contested violation or the board's authority to suspend access to common amenities, and they want to stay out of it. But I have also experienced where law enforcement will at least gently say, hey, you have to leave. And for some reason, owners listen to police more than they do a board or a manager or even HOA security. So I think that calling the police, there's nothing wrong with that, but expect that they may not help you. Secondly, I think the closing the pool and telling everyone it's Bob's fault, I think that politically that's got a lot of sort of teeth to it because a lot of times when people feel like they're being blamed for others suffering, they'll act appropriately. However, I think there's going to be a lot of complaints from those owners that are getting kicked out and potentially even some claims that the HOA is unlawfully suspending their right to their access to common areas. And then lastly, I think the other two, I think it was have a security officer physically remove the owner or threaten that. I think the last option, threatening that, would not really go very far. I mean, I'd give them a warning. But having a security physically remove them has the risk of any type of physical altercation and then a lawsuit ensuing because of that. But typically, the association has the authority to contract with security, and security is a licensed security agent. They're trained to handle these situations, and they know when to maybe draw the line if it is becoming physical. But usually if a security officer approaches and escorts them out, that will relieve the situation. But again, pros and cons with that as well. But doing nothing would be my last option.
Sean, what do you do if the guy just won't go? Let's say you don't have security.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have security, that kind of takes out that option of having security remove them, which frankly I think is the best of the bunch. I'm with Valerie on the idea of calling the police. You can try that, but in most cases, in my experience, the cops are not going to respond, or be willing to remove someone when the issue is a violation of restrictive covenants. They're going to say that's a civil issue. They're not going to want to get involved. I don't like the idea of kicking everybody else out of the pool. First of all, that is going to require someone to do that. And if you got somebody that is able to do that, then that person could just remove Bob rather than make everyone else leave. So I would say, and the whole idea of a fine, he probably already has been fined. So, I mean, that's clearly not working, at least the way I read the fact pattern. And, and the key fob thing, I assume you have that as well, but you just go follow somebody else in, as you mentioned, Ray. So, I mean, I think your best bet is to have the security officer remove Bob, but if you don't have security, you're not going to be able to do that.
Look, it's a difficult situation, but I'd add one other thing in there, a lawsuit, a court order, and then the court has the authority to, if he doesn't abide by that court order, to then either put him in jail or fine him to a civil penalty. But I'm hesitant to take that type of action in court because our courts typically are very overwhelmed and don't want to deal with just let the guy use the pool. So yeah, there could be a situation where you've exercised everything, you don't have security, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's an unfortunate situation to be in. With regard to the fining, I think that most often when an owner is not going to leave a pool, he's not going to pay a fine, and then you're left with, how do I collect the fine? And in South Carolina, courts don't like using the lien and foreclosure, or they won't allow for liens and foreclosures to merely collect a fine. And so then you're left with, okay, do we sue in magistrate court to collect this as a judgment? It's a whole can of worms. So to answer your question, they could be left with simply allowing Bob to use the amenities and trying to find another way to enforce their rules and regulations.